It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Rob, and I am here today for my State of the Dungeon address. This is for the game that took place going way back to the blissful days of the 31st of March, 2022. And the game was Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, The Follows to Spirits, and the Gooey Cube. All players were in attendance, including, by remote, we had our very own Kenna, the spell dancer, with us. For a player was playing remotely by Discord, but it works. And we managed through the marvels of modern technology and a laptop that's working pretty well to get that to go. So we had a full 7-member group, which is a little large for some people, but I think the group splits up the spotlight pretty well, and everybody gets to play. So we were starting off. The party had just gotten done with the obligatory leprechaun encounter from the St. Patrick's Day game. And they had departed. The leprechaun went down the road. The party didn't have anything else to do with it. So they prepared to go up the trail to the farm. The farm, which the goods that had been stolen from their troop had been ferried to. And that being the butcher's pig farm. So, the party continued trailing their quarry. The first thing that they came across as they were going up this hill that was doing switchbacks. It's a very steep hill. And they kept doing switchbacks through this wooded area. And they came to a scarecrow. It wasn't a posted scarecrow. It was actually dangling from the top of a tree, but its arms spread out as branches. And a dark red button eyes that seemed to follow the party. The party was suspicious, obviously, with all the things that had gone on, and the picture's pretty darn sinister. So, what do you do? Well, when you're pretty sure that means nothing but evil, it's up to allowing your ranger to pull out his bow and fire an arrow right through the heart of the thing. Which, surprisingly, actually shrilled and blood came out. Which makes them wonder, oh my gosh, what was hiding in that thing? Maybe Smedley. Who knows? Did they just kill Smedley? We don't know. So Ventov moves up with his axe to get ready to give it the old what for if it's still a menace. And he hears some rustling in the bushes. So as he comes up, he doesn't take his eyes off the scarecrow, but now Haranan and Glyn are moving up to kind of flank and see what's going on over by that bush. And what'd you come out but a dire possum? Oh yes. Possums are kind of creepy looking. They're kind of cute, but kind of creepy. You know, they have the cute, cuddly raccoon, otter kind of look, but then they can look like a complete meth addict. This favored the latter. Being dire, it had extra spines along its back, and it had kind of spines along its face, and its tail actually came into a horned point. So it looked, 5 miles of nasty. And the group went going after it. Now, it had a bit of an advantage going forward because Ventov decided he was going to swing at that scarecrow, right? And he rolled a 1. Because that happens. And I had been describing that the road had patches of ice and patches of mud in it, the path that they were going along, and sure enough, he slipped on some ice. So the giant possum, now all of a sudden, you have a prone opponent. That's advantage. It charged. So while they were able to do some little damage to the possum, who actually had pretty good armor class, all things considered, it pounced on top of Ventov and started doing some pretty horrendous damage. Ventov certainly didn't like this. considering he was in trouble and the night had just started. But the group worked together to hack and hew at this thing to try to get him off. If you can imagine for yourselves the battle between Wesley and the rodents of unusual size and the fire swamp and the Princess Bride, it was kind of like that. The thing is about that big, so nasty opponent. Eventually, though, they do work together and they do kill it. And it rolls over dead. So they're like, okay, well, that's taken care of. Let's go investigate what's exactly going on with that scarecrow. So Vanessa conjures up some fire and sets it on fire. So it's one of the sleeves. And then Ventov chops it down, cuts the cord, cuts the rope it was holding it up. And they find out that in it was nesting a regular possum, not a dire possum, just a regular one, which would have popped out as kind of a tension breaker if they had investigated that first. However, possums do have one fairly well documented skill of note. They're good at playing dead, as the dire possum was doing. Turned out Ventov made this horrendous pun. And wouldn't you know who asked for this thing to come after him for round 2? And it did. It popped up and rawr. Well, this time it got beaten up some more, which it didn't like, certainly. And after another round or two, indecisive, the group did some damage to it, but not a significant amount that would have really put it in danger of death. It decided that there's just too many bodies and it was taking too much damage, so it turned and it ran off, like a normal creature would. It was already injured, that wasn't getting food that was worth risking death, so it ran away. And somewhere out in the woods, that dire possum is still there. But the group decided this was a bit much. Ventov used his second wind. They gave him a touch of the healing juice. They were ready to continue up the trail. So, going along and going along and going along, this was about the time when Brandel's character showed up, or her player. She was a little late. Different things happened. She got there just in time for the next encounter, which was the sound of something running towards them at a great pace. Got everybody to get their weapons ready and spells prepared and ready to defend themselves, when out from the woods comes a giant hound dog. It is all black, and it has a tag on a collar around its neck that says killer. But this dog isn't a killer. This dog wants tummy rubbins and scratchings and treats. It is the least scary, at least once you know what it is, it's the least scary hound dog that could be. And the group, especially Ventov, is immediately like, oh, come here, boy. Pet, 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 scratch, 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 pet, 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 pet. And they actually had found that the scarecrow was a trap because there was bait nearby to draw that giant possum, so that, you know, there'd be another layer of security. Well, Ventov gave the meat that he had found to Killer, and Killer loved it. Killer was in heaven. He had all these people here who was going to give him scratches and pettins, and they gave him some meat. He is a happy, happy dog. Very happy to follow the group. So now they've got this great big hound dog named Killer on their side. Okay, let's see what we can do. First of all, to disabuse them, they do have a ranger and they do have a druid. Killer cannot fight. He will not fight. He is a complete coward. He just loves being around people. So, he's never going to be an animal companion. He's never going to be, you know, their combat assistant or anything like that. That's not what Killer does. He's just happy to be there. So, that's cool. So, after the group's encounter with Killer, which, again, now we've got a friend, they next came across Pig Rock. Pig Rock is 12 feet tall, and it looks like a pig looking up into the moon and doing grunting, snorting, roaring, whatever. And all around it were bottles, jugs, all around. It looked like the after effects of a big party that they had had. The butchers of the Shiners. So the group went around, looked. They found a note. It was from a constable, and the note was addressed to go back to Constable Ralph. This is from Jonas, and he said that he had some serious misgivings about going up to the butcher farm. They're crazy, and he had a bad feeling that they might not be coming back. So if they didn't, he exhorted Ralph to come back with 20 men at least to put an end to whatever was going on up there. Will that ever get to Ralph? Will it actually be necessary, depending on what the group does? Who knows? We'll see. But the encounter, Pig Rock. Okay. The group also had one other little meet-in. When they were going along, they saw a group of people coming their way. Or they heard them first, and then they saw them. They're wearing armor and carrying halberds, so they stood out in the night, as it is getting dark. Pretty, it's about dark. And they found out that there were 5 men that were dressed as guards. They had halberds, and they were coming along. Now, the interesting thing, the party wasn't just standing there as the party. The party was hiding, doing a pretty good job of it too. The only person who they saw, as far as the guards were concerned, was Worston. How? Because if you remember, Crendon has that mask that allows him to change his form, which he is now attuned to. So he decided to look like Worston. And he talked to these guards. And the guards outed themselves because it's a great disguise. They're like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be down causing problems," said the guards. And he said something about how he needed to come up and find something that had been sent back to the farm. The guards were suspicious. This was not something that Worston was supposed to be doing, or really made sense for what he was doing in general. And, basically, Crendon wasn't that convincing. So, the guards got ready to attack. Quote-unquote guards. Clearly, these are Shiners in the guards' clothing. Specifically, the clothing of the 4 guards who had been sent up to investigate the moonshining at the farm never came back. Yeah. So, it was pretty obvious what had happened to them from the amount of bloodstains and grime on these uniforms, so doesn't look good for them. But the group closed in. They weren't going to let Crendon get attacked by himself for very long. And fairly quickly, they had the guards bottled up. Haranen flanked around to the back of the guards. Ventov came charging in. But what really mattered, and what really pretty much changed the face of the encounter, was the fact that Crendon has that wand that can cast confusion. And it worked really, really well. The leader of the guards was this blonde, surly folk. And 3 of the others were all confused. And the way I was rolling, they didn't get to do a whole lot other than stand around blankly. The one who was not confused was set upon by the rest of the group, and he got dropped really quickly. And then came a weird game of whack-a-mole, where they would shake off their confusion, attack, and then get dropped the next round. So it went pretty much in order. Whack, bam, whack, bam, whack, bam, whack, bam. To the point that the guards really never had more than a single shot or 2 on any member of the group. So it was really well handled. The problem was I was rolling my Zaccatis dice. And the Zaccatis were rolling well. So Crendon took some damage. He was in bad trouble. Some other members of the group were menaced. We'll just go that far. And in general, Glynn going back and firing from a distance and dropping people. Haranen coming in and dishing out some punishment. Ventov going up and he took another halberd shot, so Ventov is once again in trouble. And, Vanessa and the others throwing flame and spells and such. In the end, they won, but at a cost. They were roughed up. And again, what's looking like it's going to be a pretty hot night anyhow, this is not a position they really wanted to be in. So, they decided they needed to take a break. There really wasn't any choice. They needed to take a 1 hour rest. Hopefully, it wasn't going to cause too many problems for them when they got to the top of that hill. So they took a rest. Several of them used their healing potions that they had. They definitely used their hit dice to heal themselves. So, the group is patched back up. Some of their spell slots have been used up. They've used up some of their magical items. I believe at this point, Glynn has used up his bracers of archery. They've been using their resources to get through these scenes so far. But they're still determined. They are still ready to go. They know they can't take a full day's rest. They can't do a long rest. So off they go. And they eventually get to a bridge, which is straddling a creek, which is running across the face of the hillside. And fishing off of that tree overhanging the bridge is a kid. And kid's a bumpkin, country bumpkin, but he's polite. He reacts to the group. What you doing here? But he genuinely seems to be pretty friendly, pretty helpful. His name is Lil Doofer. And he's from a nearby family. Not the Butchers. Nearby family. Swinards. And he gives them some advice on what they might be looking up to. He warns them to stay away from the Butchers in the first place, because he says he's been warned about them. But the group is determined anyhow, so he tells them that, they've got a nasty reputation, and there's no telling how many are up there. And, but guards have been seen going up and coming back, so they're fine. But the group knows what those guards were, so. But yeah, all in all, hey, nice little guy, no problems. They kept going on. And eventually they climbed to... one other encounter. As they were going along, they heard something off in the trees, but it sounded like somebody was making slurping noises. Some kind of odd noises. So Crendon and Glynn sneak off into the trees, both of them being relatively unarmored and quiet. They both sneak around a tree and they find two young bumpkins who were passing around a bottle of ale. A young man, a young boy, and a girl. They're about 14 years old. And they'd already had a few ales in them. So when the group jumps out, they panic. The one says, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm playing hooky from the warehouse. And the girl's like, well, we wanted to drink good stuff instead of what Auntie makes. It's just absolutely vile. And then they run. They book it. So Crendon has to deal with the boy, and he sweeps the leg and drops. Tackles him. Glynn had a bit more of a difficult time. The girl was running. Glynn was trying to apprehend her, and she pie-faced him with a stiff arm that would have done a pro football player proud. He got up, shrugged it off, chased after her, grabbed her by the back of her the tunic that she was wearing, and she... Again, her strength rolls were incredible. Those Zacatis were great. And she ran out of her top. So now she's topless and running him. And Glenn's like, oh, gosh, no, this is terrible. This is the worst case scenario. Because now he just looks creepy. And he wants to stop her because he doesn't dare let her get back up to the butchers to warn them. So he moves up and he grabs her in a headlock and rolls a natural 20 and just chokes her out. Quickly, painlessly, knocks her out. Relatively painlessly. So he carries her, tries to cover her up as best he can in the remnants of her top, and then picks her up and carries her back to Crendon. Enjoying the slings and arrows of them teasing him. They both bring them back to the group. They get interrogated. Turns out that these are cousins of the operation going on where they have warehousing. And that they again claim that, hey, they're not the people you're looking for. They're just, kids trying to get out for a bit together. And they actually still had 7 bottles of pretty good ale left. So the group's like, okay, we'll tie them to a tree. So they tied them to a tree and said, well, if you're here when we get back, we'll see. Sure, it's Dark Tide's night and they're tying people to trees. Like, that's going to end well. Interestingly enough, there was one guard that they didn't out-and-out kill. They knocked him out, took him prisoner and from a sleep spell. And they also tied him to a tree. So, because he wasn't going to give them any real information either. So, this was a trend. Maybe a pastime or a hobby? We'll see. So they continue climbing and they finally cross the top of that hill. And they see the butcher's farm. One story with an attic house with a large pig pen next to it, an attached stable, and then behind it some sort of a building, but it had smoke coming from a chimney, so they're like, that's got to be their distillery. And also, the windows were aglow, and there was smoke coming out of the central building. So the group immediately breaks out their tactical genius. They're like, okay, we have to do this. If we do this right, there's no telling how many of them there are, but we can negate their numbers advantage if we control them, attack them as they come out one at a time. How are they going to do this? Two-pronged approach, really. Number one, they had to get intel. So they sent Crendon around the lot using stealth to see what he could see. Not a bad strategy. They also had him avoid the pigs. Just in case he would have alerted them, they made noise, would have ruined all their surprise. Okay. Not a bad idea. And Crendon starts making stealthy rolls. He's good at stealth. Very nimble, so... On the other hand, he does have this tendency to sometimes roll just terribly for no apparent reason. But he's doing well now, so... Part 2 of the plan, there only seems to be one way out of that house, and that's that front door. So, Ventov has slippy oil. His idea is to take it and throw it at the porch, so that when the butchers and whatever their associates are come running out, slip on the oil, Ventov comes up, gives them the choppy chop. Glyn is also hanging around up at the front to provide support. With his bow, he can hit anybody in the yard, really. So far, that seems okay. Crendon gets all the way around the building. He gets a quick size-up of the distillery, which, from the smells, might actually be what it is. But there's some ominous signs, like there's a stump out front with an axe stained red that's half buried in the stump. Didn't do a great deal of looking at anything in the individual. Didn't poke his head into the stables, for instance. Went right past the outhouse to get around back. But he looked, and there's a really hefty padlock on that door. And looking around, didn't see anything else. So he decided to continue his circuit. And when he got around by... He wasn't going to go near the pig pen. But when he got close to that back corner of the house, some critters were there. They're called hog skeeters. And they're a little bit like sturges, except they don't really suck blood as much as drill you to death and then, feast on the corpse. So there's a bunch of them. Crendon is a bard. And he's not, let's just say he's tapped out on a lot of his resources. So, throws up a sleep spell, tries to get away, holding onto his rapier as he needs. The problem is, the sleep spell, these things are flying and zooming towards him. So they all get attacks in because they go simultaneously. Crendon does get pinged a couple of times. He's hurting. And he also failed a ominous constitution roll for what he knows not yet. And 6 of them drop. The problem is they were flying at a pretty high velocity and came from above, so they hit the ground. And then when they did that, they took damage. When you take damage and you're in a sleep spell, you wake up. So the sleep spell did do 2 things for him. It gave him a reprieve of a round or so, and it injured them so that any damage was going to kill what was left of those hog skeeters. Which meant that when Crendon turned around and finished off the one that was not put to sleep with his rapier, he looked like he was doing pretty well and might just be able to get away with this. But the group heard him cry out. So the casters, Kenna and Brandel, were determined that they were going to go around the backside of the house, as would Haranen. So that they were going to go and support Crendon. Ventov and Glyn were still determined to keep their vigil at the front of the house because between the 2 of them, they were pretty sure that they could keep the slippy oil and then, dominate the front and hold off long enough for the rest to come back if they could. Not a bad plan. Party's a little split, but, Vanessa decided that because she can fling fire still, she was going to go back and she was going to go around by the outhouse and cover by the outhouse. The outhouse smells terrible. I mean, this is a long-standing family outhouse and is absolutely revolting. Even came with its own picture. You might ask, why? For just an outhouse? There's a reason. The reason is somebody that they will not forget for quite a long time, I'd wager. The outhouse was the lair of this guy. His name is Filthy Floyd. And he came out of the outhouse. Yes, he lives down there. Yeah, disgusting as it sounds. And this is a skilled rogue. He came up and shanked Vanessa with his filthy, filthy knife. That was bad. What's also bad is that he smells so bad as he lives in excrement that everybody around has to make a saving throw or become poisoned from the smell. Everybody who came up to that failed the saving throw. Nobody made it. So everybody is sickened and repulsed by this point. Now, at this point, the group isn't doing stealth anymore. It's kind of hard. They had the fighting going on with the skeeters. Vanessa screamed when she got shanked, and this got her by the shoulder, and he's giggling, covered in filth, and stabbing her with his filthy knife. Ventov throws the bottle of slippy oil perfectly onto the porch and is ready for the worst that could happen. But now he hears Vanessa scream. So he gets ready to head on over to help out. Glyn doesn't need that. Glyn's got a bow. Glyn plugs Floyd. Does some damage. Not enough to take him down, but he hurts him. Now, the bugs don't do very well. A volley of magic missiles from Brandel and from Vanessa, or Brandel and Kenna, pretty much put paid to the rest of the bugs quickly. Haradin gets one last blow in. And then the group starts running back because they heard Vanessa scream. So they're running around, and they run through the yard in front of the stables, and they hit the wall of stench. And all of them fail. So now everybody's rolling at disadvantage for everything. Not good. Ventov is like, gotta go and, well, if it's just a bad smell, I've got a great saving throw, and I'm a fighter, so proficiency. Yay! Gets ready to turn around and go, and all of a sudden, tunk, he gets hit hard by a sling bullet, fired from back in the trees, back beyond the path that they came up the road to. So somebody's out behind them now. And he calls out, "Foe behind us!" Well, they all think, who did we follow? Who followed behind us? It's got to be a little doofer. I mean, technically, they didn't search the countryside around. There could be anybody. But they're like, if somebody about like that was going to attack us, they'd be hiding in the dark, small. Yeah, it's probably a little doofer guy. But now, he's proving to be pretty accurate with that thing. It's even hitting Ventov, who's not an easy target. And both he and Glenn are kind of taking a look and seeing if they can find him. And they don't. Even with their excellent sight and darkness, they did not hit his stealth roll, the person who's out there. So Glenn settles on shooting another arrow into Filthy Floyd. Well, Floyd is now damaged. Two of those arrows did quite a bit of damage to him. And the little bit of offense that the rest of the group could muster while sickened, he used his disengage action for his slippery ability, and he bolted back down into the outhouse. For him, it was just a simple matter of moving away from the sickened and badly injured Vanessa, who he paused to slash her one more time. Didn't drop her, but she's in bad shape. And he dove back into the filth in the outhouse. And they heard the sploosh. So now, the group has enemy behind them, throwing rocks. They've got Vanessa badly injured. Several people in pretty bad shape. Crendon himself, I think, is still in kind of rough shape. I don't know what they're looking at for healing potions either. And I know that most of their healing from their spellcasters has been tapped out. So it'll be interesting to see the resources that they have. But before everything ended up, the group got together. And they went and they broke one of those front windows in the house. And they yelled out, "We finished off your Stinky and the kid out here. We're going to burn your house down." And from the other side they heard, "Well, that ain't exactly hospitable. But I tell you what, you try burning our house down, you might be able to do it. Well, you're going to be burning up a lot more than just our house. You'll be burning up this here lawman came to pay us a visit." And they're like, "You're lying. You've killed them all already." "Oh, are we? Go ahead and bring him down. Let him talk to him." And sure enough, Constable Eustace talked to them. He's like, "Yeah, these crazy people have held me prisoner for 2 days." So now the group is like, ugh. And also the burning down thing is kind of off the table a little bit more because some of the things that were stolen from, again, Mother Selvence's wagon, that is precious to their group and they absolutely do not want to see it destroyed, could be in there. Probably is in there. So burning it down, last ditch resort if anything. So the group is kind of at a sticky spot. And also their way into the place, the most easy and obvious way that wouldn't give them some significant disadvantages to trying, is the front door that they've just slipperied. So now they've actually given the opposite of an advantage. They've helped out the butcher family, as it turns out, a little bit. But also, there are some windows, but windows, if you try to break your way in, can be very bad for the person trying to breach. So it'll be interesting to see what they choose, but one way or the other, won't be boring as the group begins to see exactly what lies in the butcher's farm. So, until next time, thank you for joining me. I'm Rob, and when we next pick this up, it's going to be full of excitement, that's for sure. So, until next time, thank you and farewell.